Welcome back to episode 3, board connection. So I'm going to first begin with connecting the recharge port. So I'm going to wire my 3 connections that go up to the board and then get the right length and all of that. So looking at the recharge port, where I see this kind of metal ring here connected to this pin, that's where I want my positive to be. You can see that right there. It's going to that ring. The ring is connecting to this prong. That's going to be my positive, which means the back side here will be the battery negative, and then the opposite side of the positive will be the board negative. So I'm going to use black wire for the battery, white wire for the board, and red wire for the positive board. So I've cut my wires to length. I did about just a little bit more than what I think I'll need, and that's always a safe bet. Always do longer than what you think you need, because the wire will be here and it's going to feed up directly through this spot here, and the end of the board where it's going to connect will be right there. So the wire doesn't need to be too long, but I did just a little bit extra just so I have some leeway. So I've got my board negative, I have the battery negative black, and I'm getting ready to solder the positive here. And when I do this, I will have just a little bit of length or of exposed wire, because these prongs are pretty long, and I want to make sure that sets along the length of the prong there. And then what I'll do is seal that with some heat shrink. Now, as you can see here, the positive is soldered well, the battery negative is soldered well, but the board negative is raised and a little exposed there. So I'm going to redo that one to make it look, seal it up and make it look a little better. Okay, now that already looks better. Okay. I've applied the heat shrink, and I did it just a little shorter than normal, and I did that because once it goes into the bottom here, it's going to need to be able to I have to be able to flex the wires up so I can feed them here. And if you do the heat shrink too long, then it's going to be very difficult for it to bend. So I kind of did slightly shorter heat shrink there, but the recharge port wires are on there and ready to connect. So with the position of the positive and negative pads here, I'll need to feed the wires through this hole here. Now what I'll do is I'll take the wires and I'll feed them through that hole on the top right, and then position the recharge port up into its slot. So change of plans. Before I feed the recharge port into its spot, I need to be able to connect the battery to its wire. So what I did was I took the battery negative off of the recharge port. I'm going to connect that to the battery, and then when I push the battery in, the wire will feed up and through. I can connect that to the recharge port on the opposite end, and then feed the recharge port into its position after that. I have not found a a good way to connect the battery without it being removable, other than soldering the wire directly to the ends of the battery. I'm not sure if that's the best practice, but that's the way that it's the only way that I've been able to figure it out, and it has worked in the past with no problems. So I'm going to do that again with this build here. So I connected or soldered the battery negative directly to the battery there, and then from here this will feed through the chassis, and then that wire for the recharge port comes right out that side, and I can connect that to the port. While I'm at it, I'll pretend and do the top side of the battery too. So the battery is wired up, and I sealed it or protected it with some hot glue at both the joints, so that way they don't come loose or short by touching something else. So now what needs to happen is slide the battery through. Now my negative wire is feeding, and then what I'll do with the positive end here is take this wire here, feed it through this little hole, and slide it out there and up to the board. And I want this to be exactly on the side, like that. Okay, so when the board is in place, that'll feed up and connect there. Next, feeding the recharge port through. Now the recharge port is in place. The battery is slid in its position. Once I get the neopixel through, I'll probably connect these two wires together, so I only have one going into the board at that point. And as you can see, the recharge port is secure and ready to go. Alright, so moving ahead. I'm going to use 28 gauge wire for the neopixel connector, at least for the data and the negatives, and then I'll probably bump it up to 26 for the power. But I cut my wire to fit here with a little extra length because I want to be able to slide the chassis just about completely out in case I need to get access to the board and things like that. And then I don't want to use too thick of a wire just because it'll get tight once you're trying to bunch everything up in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is try something different this time and solder the wires to the board first with a little coming out, and then from there with my spliced wires and things get that connected to the neopixel connector. So again, I have to use these three and these two right here. Get a little closer. Yep, these three and those two right there. But it's going to be on this side, so they're going to be running out, and then these two here, I'm going to kind of angle this way so that they run out from the center. So the 4 negative pads for the neopixel connected into 2 wires because I only have 2 negative pads on the neopixel PCB. So now what I'm going to do is wire the PCB connector, and from there I can run those wires down to the hilt and then connect these together. All the wires are soldered to the PCB. I've got my 2 positives here. I'm going to connect those into one and then have one red wire feeding down to the board with power. Okay, everything is soldered to the neopixel connector, and the two power wires are going into one. I think I will most likely braid all these together, so that way it feeds into neatly into the board, and I can easily coil it once I seal it up. And then I'll seal the back of this with some hot glue as well. But I'm going to wait until I test everything and make sure that everything works and is a go before I do that and coat it with some hot glue. But for the most part, the neopixel connector is just about done there. Okay, I'm going to braid this and feed it down and get ready to connect to the board. So everything is braided and that'll coil up nice, good to go. Let's move on to the switch. So I ran into a little bit of a hiccup, and the dual tactile switch, one of the buttons pressed great, but the other button did not press well, and it looked like it was crooked. So I took this switch apart, and this was the old switch, and you can see how the silver piece here has been bent up. And if I can get the right angle, you can see that it's not straight. So I figured it's best, because I'm not going to keep this hilt. I'm going to sell it, and I'm not going to send defective or non-operating equipment to someone. I just don't believe in that. So I went ahead and added this new tactile switch there. It's just slightly taller or longer than its predecessor, but I don't think that'll be a problem, mainly because it's not that much, and second of all, that could just help differentiate between the activation switch and the auxiliary switch. So I'm going to put this back together, and this switch should be okay and fully functional. The switch has been reassembled, and as you can see, here's the one that I replaced. It's a little bit taller. I'll make that the activation switch, and then the shorter one, which is the original, I'll make that the auxiliary. And if you can listen, they are both clicking and working just fine. With the switches, I'm going to attempt to do another quick connect. And what I've done so far is I've taken the two power lines, twisted those together so that will become one. And then I'll take these quick connectors, take those two positives, make that one, connect that there, and then have the aux and the activation on the black line there. And then I'll have these two here that can quick connect to these, and then I'll run these together to the power on the board, and then run the other two to the aux and the activation on the board. And that way, when I want to take everything apart, I can just undo the quick connector and easily slide the whole chassis out, minus the neopixel, but I can unsolder from the joints and make that hopefully an easy disconnect as well. So that's what I'm going to strive to do now. At this point, I have taken the quick connector here and I twisted the two black lines together. That will be the short end is going to be the auxiliary, the long end will be the activation, and I indicated with a black marker here, so you can see that that's going to be the activation switch, and the other plain white one will be the auxiliary. I did the same thing with the side that's going to connect to the actual switch. That's the board side. This is the switch side, and I did the same thing here on the back. On one side, I did a black marker to indicate that's going to be the activation, and the other non-marked side will be the auxiliary. So now I just have to take that, connect the two power lines here, and then the green will be aux and activation, and then I'll have the quick connect side on the switch end, and then this portion goes to the actual board. This is the power line here. I did that a little bit longer just so I can get this set and then cut whatever extra wire I have there to match, because I want these to be able to be straight off of the back of the board. Okay. The quick connects for the switches are done. I have that connected to the board and also to the switch itself. So that'll be nice and easy. There. Next thing, I'm going to connect the neopixel. I'm doing a real kind of ugly dry connection here. I've got the neopixel connector attached, and I've got the power wires just spliced into one for now just to connect for the test, and then once I know everything works okay, I'll clean this up, do the right lengths, and make sure everything's neat and organized in there. Neopixel's connected, spliced all the power lines, negative to the ground, or the ground is ready from the recharge port. So now I'm going to connect the speaker, and from there I'll connect the two power lines, and then we'll fire it up and do our test. Let's do the speaker now. I connected the speaker wires, and I'm going to feed those through out and then inside of the speaker. And now I'm going to do the power lines, the ground, and the battery. Once that's connected, I'll feed the speaker wires through and solder on the speaker. Okay, I think we're ready for our first test. I attach the speaker here, and the power is all connected. Got the kill key in. So first thing I'll do here is connect the switches. Remember, I've got black to black, so I know which is which. Okay, so that's the black is the activation, and then the non-black is the auxiliary. So alright, switches are connected. Next thing is going to be SD card. Okay. This is a first for me as it is for you, because that's what I like to do in these videos, is whatever for my first reaction is your first reaction. Okay, guess that's a good sign. Let's power on. Cool. Switches work. Now let's test the connector, because I did not get a specific guide on how to do the KR connector. Here we go. Uh-oh. You know what? I may have to check to make sure that's set up for neopixel, because it's not powering up the blade. Let me do that real quick and check the configuration on the SD card. Alright, let's try this again. The config file said 0 pixels, so that's probably why the blade wasn't lighting up. So hopefully now that I adjusted that, it should light up the blade. And there it goes, yeah. Cool. All right. So, connected everything to the board. Everything works. Switches are good as I wanted. The KR Sabers neopixel connector works great. Speaker's good. Everything's good to go. So now I just need to go in here and tidy up these wires, clean them up, and the next episode, all this will be fitting into the hilt and getting the wrap customized, looking nice there. So everything's well on its way here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.